loading.
Hello and welcome to episode, I think, 8 of the Snowball Show. And I, Andrew, Ducky, am joined by an esteemed colleague that we have not had on for the history of this show, Mr. Isaac McIntyre. How are we going,
Hello.
Mr. EIC?
Yeah, pretty good, pretty good. Glad to have finally made my debut after this historic run of Snowball Show episodes.
Well, it has been relatively historic. This one is historic in the fact that we don't have Nico for the first time. Our life and soul of this podcast needs to take a break this week. He's got some things to work out, but we all wish he's all going well. Same thing with Judgy. Please send them your well wishes whenever you can. As per normal with the Snowball Show, we're going to open things up with a quick wrap through the news that has been concerning OC Esports and we find interesting. And at the top, and if you've been living under a rock for the last 6 months, and definitely the last week, you need to get out of it because Valorant's alive. Valorant servers are up for OCE finally. The full launch has happened. Have you jumped into Valorant yet, Isaac?
Yeah, I've had a couple of games with mates. They hard carried me. I'm not a big mouse and keyboard operator. You know, I ride the sticks. So yeah, I'm shit.
Why do you have to ride the six man? Why?
Born and bred.
Why do I have to share a half and half with a console player?
That's just your luck in life, isn't it?
I guess so. But yes, if you haven't got onto it, Valorant is live. You can download it, playvalorant.com. It's very fun. So give it a try. Also, in big league news this week in China, the one and only golden child of Chinese League of Legends, Uzi, has finally announced his retirement. He did so yesterday, citing health issues, recently getting diabetes and been working through that, as well as his arm, back, and wrist issues that have been plaguing his entire career. What are your thoughts on the entire thing, Isaac? You wrote a nice little, I guess, memoir in a sense.
Yeah, I think this was something that was coming for a while. The writing was on the wall when he didn't turn up at all in the spring split. You know, he had kind of gotten this reputation of stepping in for the big game moments for RNG, and when he didn't even turn up in playoffs and they got punted out early, it kind of was all pointing towards that. Obviously, I put that in that piece about 18 hours before he called time on it. So I'm glad we published that one when we did.
Hmm.
Would have been a bit of a waste otherwise. But yeah, this is a big name. I guess the level of Uzi's effect on League of Legends is equivalent to someone like Faker. So I guess it's the first real reminder that the people that started playing this game and were involved with the pro scene early in the tens are going to start retiring soon.
Yeah, it kind of was shocking. Like it's been a long time coming, but to actually just hear the news yesterday was rather jarring. But we all wish the best to Uzi. Hope he gets a nice full recovery very soon. And maybe, just maybe, we might see him on the Rift in a few years' time. Who knows? I'm going to run through the next couple of things real quickly. So in Overwatch, Contenders Season 1 is finishing up this week. The Australian finals are live right now. Ground Zero took the first series against Sydney Drop Bears to progress to the grand final. Sydney Drop Bears are now playing against Mindfreak. Over in Pacific, Talent Esports took home their third title, thrashing Far East Society in the grand final to take home the Pacific title with a full Korean roster this time around. And the Korean and Chinese playoffs are still running, and they will be finishing up sometime this week. Also, quickly in Six Masters on the Rainbow Six side of things, Wildcard have opened up a nice little lead for themselves after getting a solid 2-0 win over Elevate. Itby Style absolutely showed up for Akami with a 23 kill performance on one of the maps and 34 kills over the entire series to secure them a second heading into the final week of action. And we've had another team kind of fall out of the playoffs race with LFO losing their series to Sinister and quite possibly putting the dash through the rest of their season. And finally, to top off the Oceanic Esports news, StarCraft 2 and Warcraft 3 have had their Season 2 announced for ESL ANZ Championships. There's about a 5,000 pros pool combined between both the Blizzard franchises, and there's a Pro League Tour spot available for StarCraft 2 players, which basically means that Probe's going to be going international again when you look at things like that. And I can see one of our guests in the background cheering quite heavily for that. So let's bring those guests in. Now, we have got two of the OPL's all-time greats, basically. There've been two guys who have been there since the start of the scene. One of them has recently won a title, and the other one has been wallowing in fourth for quite some time. It's Tim Carbon Wendell from Legacy Esports and Jake Spawn Tiberi from Order. How are you going, fellas?
Doing. Thanks for having me back.
I was
like your
doing
intro.
good before the intro. I'm not gonna lie. I was chilling. I was hoping I was gonna get introduced as a commentator after the very kind words, and then I just get dropped as the fourth place general manager. So here we are.
You can do it all, mate. Though your GM, your coach, your caster. When you're getting your playing career off board, when you booting only.
Trust me, the playing career is a very long way away, and some would argue that I can't do any of it. Hence why the repetitive fourth places keep taking place. But I mean, Oceanic Esports and Tim would be well across this. You kind of have to be able to wear multiple hats at different times for an organization. And I think that this year, with some of the restructuring that happened around League of Legends domestically, it made a lot of sense to try and make that transition across.
Yeah. So we're going into split 2 of the OPL. It starts off tomorrow. I'm pretty sure Chiefs versus Pentanet's the first game on the card. But let's look a little bit into the off season. Obviously, there were very few changes made, but there were still some pretty big changes overall. Who do you think were the winners of this quiet off season?
I mean, there weren't really any huge changes. I think curious to see what Direwolves do in split 2. Obviously, they came second last split, but Cupcake played a number of their finals games. He's been not really announced, but he's staying on for split 2 as assistant coach. They've got Shern also coming in to remote coach. I'm curious what that's going to look like. Obviously, Shern has a wealth of international experience, so you can only assume that that's going to help. But yeah, I'm curious to see what happens with Cupcake and Decoy, given the obvious preference for Cupcake towards the end of last split, and what's going to happen there. I think that was my biggest takeaway, that there wasn't nothing definitive came out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think from my perspective, when you have a look at it, there's kind of two big omissions that need to be spoken about off the bat. Seems like CK won't be playing this split for the Chiefs for whatever reason. That's just word on the street. I haven't really heard what his suggested replacement is. And then obviously when you have a look at the Legacy boys, their coach has gone back to Singapore as well. And I was really, really vocal about how good I thought Jensen Go was. I was lucky enough to have some really great conversations with the guy. I think he's a mastermind. And I know that he spent a lot of time with Denian, and you hope that Legacy are able to continue that wealth of knowledge that was there. And I'm sure that there's some good relationship to be able to reach out and continue to work with him in some small matters. But I think losing a head coach like that can have impact. So kind of the teams that I thought were the two best teams for the majority of the season are going to have some changes. Is it going to be enough to shake up the OPL? I think still yet to be decided, right? I think Parbu to Pentanet is an interesting one because I don't think Sully was a problem at Pentanet, but by no ways was he the solution. And Parbu was definitely the solution at Gravitas when he came in. He made them look, a lot better when he played.
He played top there, right?
Yeah, he played top there, but he was really, really decisive and gave them a point around the map. And, there is something to be said about charisma and kind of being that shot caller on Summoner's Rift within OS, even if the global trend is to move away from it. So I think, there's been some interesting things, some sideways movement at the least for kind of teams like Pentanet. And I think the bottom teams actually had some really interesting shuffles. I think P19's playing out of nowhere. I think, Quaku's being moved across from second last to last or last to second last, depending on which way you want to look at it. But I think there have been a couple of roster shuffles down at the bottom that will also make teams not necessarily better, but definitely more well-rounded with how they need to be played around each other.
Well, then I guess the question is, who has come out of the off-season as the biggest winner? If the top teams, Legacy, Chiefs, Direwolves, Down, have retained that power, like you guys said, is there somebody, I guess, you can see from the bottom that had that experience in the first split, got the pickups like Pentanet, that can move into a playoff spot?
I would say Legacy are the big winners because no one else got significantly better. And if that's the case, like if we just ran the season back right now, Legacy were by far the best team at the end of the season, call a spade a spade. So if there hasn't been that much of a roster shuffle, which is what we're saying, then you have to say that Legacy is the biggest winner because no one's really gone overseas and bought in a huge import, or there hasn't been a roster shuffle between Direwolves, Chiefs, and Order to kind of create a team that would be significant enough to do damage at this stage of the season if the grand final was tomorrow.
I think the opportunity to give Tally the time in the off season to continue working on mid lane and to show that's
Is that what he was doing in the off season? Chat to Jimmy every now and again.
What was Jimmy up to, Carbon? What was he up to? Come on, you've got the goss.
Playing WoW. I think he played some RuneScape. Actually, just mostly WoW. I was going to say a couple of the boys right now are on the chess grind. There's a lot of chessing going on, but James is actually one of the few that isn't playing chess. So I'm pretty sure he just swapped one addiction for another. No break really for him. It was straight to the grind, just on a different game.
He's playing WoW Classic, or he's the modern boy?
No, he's modern. I'm pretty sure. I mean, I don't know much about WoW, but just from looking over the shoulder once in a while when I'm there, it definitely doesn't look like vanilla.
Yeah, him and Skimmy are hitting the 2v2 arenas at the moment. I hear. He's a retail boy. He's Alliance Frostmourne, which is just absolutely disgraceful as far as I'm concerned. But he's not a bad World of Warcraft player. The old Wally Thacker. Him and Jakey go okay.
Yeah, I guess just on the off season again, in terms of winners, I don't think there was a winner in the sense that sort of like I guess what Jake said, but there weren't any huge changes really. Like there have been a few changes, and then I guess if we change how we're defining winner, and we're looking at only the teams that have actually made changes, like us, Jensen going home is it's not great for us, but it's not a change necessarily. I would say the same for like the Chiefs with CK. Assuming he's not coming back, there's obviously it is an off-season change, but it's not it's not the kind I think we're trying to discuss.
Mm-hmm.
For me, Parbu to jungle is one. That's probably one of the few where I think like a talented player is on a new team, and Pentanet were like a middling roster last split. I think a few people were talking about them doing quite well at the start of the season. There was a lot of talk about Pentanet. Well, they were confident, and there were a number of other people I think around the OPL that were talking about, like these guys are doing well in scrims. Apparently, difficult scrim partner, and I think they picked up some wins earlier in the season, and then just sort of tapered off. So that for me, I think, is the big change where, okay, I agree with Jake. I don't think Sully was the problem there, but I mean, you have to change something, I suppose.
Yeah.
And it's not like there's a ton of depth on the server this year. So
Unless you want to bring you and Juice back or go get someone else to play jungle, you're struggling a little bit.
There's not a lot of depth this year. Obviously, a lot of players left, which moved a lot of the lower tier players up to the top teams. So yeah, I think that's probably the best in terms of like positive, people trying to be creative with their rosters. But I think quiet winner, I think is Order. If you think about, Legacy losing a coach, Chiefs losing a player, Direwolves are unchanged more or less. They lost, rumored that Kai's not there anymore. So, the top three teams have sort of had changes that are probably not great, or at least not maybe intended. Whereas, Order, Pentanet has made an addition and they're hoping that works. And I could see it improving them. And then Order hasn't made any changes, able to build a little bit on their season 1 performance. So I could see Order doing pretty well this split.
I guess we
We've got
touched on
kind
it a
words for
little
each other. One person said, you got Jake over here going, yeah, Legacy did really well, and then you got Tim over here.
It's the same theory.
Just hug on camera.
It's the same theory, really, right? What Jake was saying is that given that we just won and nothing's really changed other than Chiefs losing a player and whatever's going on at Direwolves, the assumption would be that the first place team would finish first again. And I'm just sort of continuing that and saying, well, if the first 3 teams have had either no change or a negative change, then the assumption there is that fourth will have a better performance.
What he's trying to say, Isaac, is we're just here to meet our contractual obligation of Snowball. We're reading off the script that you gave us before the show. Like, if you don't like the script, just write a better script.
My last question for that before we move on from the winners of the season is, if Legacy and Chiefs have had these changes, for Direwolves to be bringing in Schönfire, who is one of the best OPL players to have graced the Rift here, is the question mark for you guys whether he can translate that to a coaching role. And if you guys aren't talking about Direwolves, apart from the group love hugging of praising each other, is he not going to have enough of an impact with Direwolves to change their fortunes in Split 2?
Direwolves to me is the Order of Split 1 last year, where we genuinely went into the playoffs as probably the 4th best team. And then we had a really, really great best of series and got on a roll. And momentum in these gauntlet formats is so great. And I think, like, other people can make excuses for us. There was an hour-long pause. I have a very young team. Some shit went down in that time when we thought we had destroyed the Nexus as the game had disconnected. Then to go into an hour-long pause while you think you have won the game and then be told you have to pay the last minute of the game again, it is quite mentally taxing. Whereas I think for them, it would have been quite rejuvenating because they're down 0-2 and, in a bit of a tough spot. And then when they won those 3 games in a row, they just went on a huge momentum streak. And the reason that I'm not calling them, I don't think they're a bad team off that because, my team did the same thing and we came second as well. But I think that is incredibly difficult to replicate. Schön becoming a coach, how to say this in the most inflammatory way possible. Probably doesn't do fuck all for that team is probably the way I'll go about it. Schön played the game in OS unlike anyone else no one replicated the way Schön played. He literally, for the lack of better words, bullied 4 people into playing around the jungle position in a role that before that had very facilitative and gank-heavy junglers. And Schön didn't play that style at all. So I don't know whether that will do anything for the Direwolves, to be honest. And if the rumors are true and their head coach has actually left, head coaches leaving is big disruptive if the person that replacing them isn't from the ecosystem already.
I think for me, the challenge for Schön, I will preface it by saying that I don't know, I don't speak to him. I don't know him very well. It's been a number of years since he's been here. My assumption is that, through playing in NA and playing Korea and playing for TL, that he's learned a lot, and he has, ideas about the game. And, if he's able to teach those effectively, I could see that having a positive influence on that team. I think also, obviously, Chippy's, back when Shern did play here, that team trusted him a lot. That, they were very...
Until they kicked him.
Yeah, but they were very... how do you say it? Like, they listened, I guess. They listened intently to what he had to say. And, Chippies is still there, and I could see that being a dynamic that works. For me, the real difficulty here is losing, again, rumors, a head coach, but having 2 remote coaches to replace him. I think if you have a head coach and a remote coach, that is a dynamic that can work, because you have, one person obviously dealing with the interpersonal, the relationships in the team. Obviously, they also have league knowledge, but there's someone there to facilitate what's happening. And then you have, maybe another just source of information. It's sort of like it's like a tap of learning that you can sort of turn on and off, because they're not there. You absorb it at your pace and not at the coach's pace, which doesn't always work. So that, for me, is the biggest thing. To have 2 remote coaches will be, I think, a challenge. But one can only assume that they've decided they've decided to make this change. So yeah, there must be a benefit. They must think it will work. So I'm willing to find out. I think what's really interesting about Direwolves is the team dynamic. What Jake was saying was right. They weren't having an amazing split 1 regular season, then really turned it on during the gauntlet, and then, because people only remember gauntlet runs, sort of what happens before that gets wiped clean. But they were definitely having some difficulties. Decoy in, decoy out, cupcake in, cupcake out. That, for me, that will be the most interesting development for me from that team in the next split.
Finish looking back at the offseason, now I can look forward into the future. Tim, you found yourself and your team in a very interesting position for once. You've actually got a defender title. Has that changed your perception?
Congratulations, mate.
Yeah, congratulations. Just in case you didn't know, you did win last split.
We did.
Yeah. Does that change the perception you have of the OPL? Does it change the expectations that you set?
Not really. Not really. No. Look, for me, I think there's a few ways to look at it, I suppose. For me personally, it's not the first time I've won a title. I know, because we weren't called Legacy. People like to forget that.
I'm pretty sure I was still in diapers when you guys won that. I was a pretty young boy back then.
But I have won a title, and I have tried to defend a title, and I know what that's like. So for me personally, it's not new necessarily. For the team, we have a few players who have won previously. Babip, Rays, Topoon. So, those guys all know what it's like. I think the biggest thing is the feeling of it wasn't real. It didn't feel the same. And I don't know if I don't want to speak for my team, but it didn't feel like a real win, because it was online, and it wasn't with the fanfare that an MEO might bring, or even just a normal split 1 final where you can see the team, and there's the process of you're going there and you're nervous before the game, and you've got to do a new photo shoot, and they got to film an extra, it's an extra content day that you need to film, and now you're giving your opinion about the opposite team, and none of that was there. It was essentially a slightly more stressful scrim set that we happened to play very well in. And of course, everyone's stoked about winning the title, and everybody was very happy, and we celebrated. But it's not the same as what as what it would or will be when we win at MEO.
Well, I'm pretty sure Topoon shit his pants when you brought out the streamers.
I am convinced that if I didn't get excited on their behalf, none of them would have cared.
How
Or at
much?
least shown it. At least shown it. I mean, that's not fair to say. Of course they care. And like I said, I don't want to talk on the team's behalf. Winning the title meant a lot for them. Like James obviously never won a title. He's tried almost as many times as I have. He never won a title. He won his first title. He was over the moon. And obviously we've spoken a lot about it since it's happened. But it's just in terms of the question was about defending the title. It's really about let's experience this again on the big stage. That's
I
why I see
know
it at least.
after the grand final win, when Quinny spoke to snowballesports.com, the Australian publication, he said without MSI, it didn't really have that much of a feeling. The fact that you guys have kind of missed out on that international trip as well, do you feel like that's going to make it easier to just get right back into the flow?
Just before you jump in there, Tim, like how long are we going to talk about winning OPL finals? Because if I don't really have much to contribute to this part of the conversation. I just nick off. We get a nice three shot for Swifty set up.
You've won you've won a few titles, Jake. Don't be modest.
I don't know what you're talking about, mate.
Let the people know what's really going on.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Have you guys actually on that? Lastly, have you guys actually received the trophy yet? Have you guys had the chance to lift it above your head triumphantly?
No, we never got it. No, it wasn't like we were because all the news about like NA and stuff and how EU had done it had come out, that they had a car waiting in between the exact middle point of both houses, ready to like send the order of like drive this way or drive that way to deliver the cup. So we had heard about that in the days prior. So I was sort of in the back of my mind hoping it would happen, but like obviously we have comms with Riot. This is what's going to happen if you win. Rah rah rah. They did send us all their confetti. That wasn't my idea. That was theirs, which was a lot of fun to clean up. I actually found some today stuck in the back of one of the monitors. But no, we haven't had the cup yet. No.
I mean,
at least one of your players hasn't had the chance to break it then, like Sven.
I'm sure it's insured.
I mean, speaking to Isaac's point a little bit though, knowing Quinn from a previous life, and having played hardcore Diablo 3 with the man, which everyone knows is one of the most competitive games in esports, he would be one of those guys that, unless he got that shot, because he's kind of done it right. Quinny had a really successful run at the Chiefs. He went overseas. He was a hotness when he went overseas. Like, I don't know whether many people remember that Brisbane final, but he really popped off in a couple of those games. Like when he went overseas, he was kind of the golden child of OS because he hadn't made the mistakes that the four old men had made yet. So like it was kind of like fresh, renewed hope. Like finally, not a choker going overseas, because of how much he stepped up in that final. So I really think that Raze is kind of like, he's incredibly driven. He's actually kind of inspirationally driven, and he is like actually a pretty good like quiet leader. I think I don't know how much he's evolved in the last couple of years, but I always had a lot of respect for him in that regard. His work ethic is like elite. So I think that he would be one of those people, Isaac, that if he doesn't get to go back to an international event, if he doesn't get to prove that that was a blip on the radar at the start and he is that good, especially with Lost, FBI, King going overseas, and him kind of watching them go at every stage of his career, he would be incredibly hungry to get over there. Just knowing the kind of guy he is. This is a guy that when Origin came around, played mid and looked like he could play mid against the best mid laners in the OPL, then comes back, plays 80 carry. There was rumors in the offseason of some shenanigans happening again, and he was like, I will do whatever it takes to just win the OPL and get back overseas. And I think that's kind of inspirational. I think you do have to celebrate the wins, and obviously Tim's done that with the team, but for someone like Raze that's done it before, he would want to get back there.
It does really sound like that's the mentality that Legacy has. Obviously, Tim, you can correct me if you want, but you half jokingly said when we win MEO, I remember Raze said, he was hungry, he's going to win MEO, and he's going to go to Worlds. There's no doubt, I guess, in his mind, and I'm sure that translates a little bit. So it should be interesting to see how that goes through the split.
Yeah, the scariest thing for us in Split 2 is whether or not COVID cans Worlds.
And that's obviously
a cross, because I think it hasn't been cancelled yet.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
What happens, it happens.
I'm
Nice
actually
with
really
that.
interested to see how that will affect the elite dynamic when like the world spot vanishes and then players
Mm.
online. How players from different teams will react to that.
I don't know. Worlds does. It would be weird to have a year without Worlds. I actually, yeah, I don't know. I
think
really liked the LPL LCK thing the other day,
that was cool. I
That was
agree.
and I sort of thought it'd be cool if more regions could do that. But some of them, you know what I mean. Some of them, it's just too far. But
I mean, we're getting 80 ping to some C places in Valorant at the moment. I've been jumping on with a couple of people, so maybe there is an opportunity there. Obviously, 6 ping is ideal, but 80 is not undoable. What I was going
I
to,
live in Perth, mate.
yeah,
That's what we live
exactly
with.
right. What I was going to mention about that is, I think that if I'm a player on Tim's team at the moment, right? Let's pretend that I'm as talented as Topoon is, because I thought he was the best player in the OPL. I went out on a number of occasions saying that Tim had the best coach and the best player. And I thought he was like the least talked about member of that team because he could just do everything. If you gave him a hard carry, he plays hard carry, plays weak side, plays strong side, was running around in scrims playing Soraka against us and annoying the shit out of Swiper. Like, this is a guy that is like so damn talented. If I'm him, I'm playing a lot for Worlds, but a little bit in the back of my head is I'm also probably playing for Korean Challenger Series or NALCS or, LEC and stuff like that. So I think the benefit of being in Oceanic region with how well guys like Destiny has done, the fact that Tommy actually had a pop-off performance in the playoffs, that Vic is like the hard carry with Closer of Golden Guardians, is there is a little bit there that there is slightly more to play for. Sure, they want, I'm sure they're all great guys and they want honor and, glory for Tim Wendell, but they also want like that international opportunity. And we know that playing well in O's will get you looked at because Victor only went overseas once and he was snapped up like that.
yeah, I think there's a path. I think there are certain players who have blazed a path. We can see it. Other players can see it. We know it can be done, and we know you're not necessarily one and done. There's a fear that you get sent over, you do a split, you get sent home because you're not good enough. And I think we've seen a few guys now get re-signed or signed to other teams, or bouncing into academy. It's still not a bad place to be, by the way. So there's definitely a path. And look, one of the key questions I ask when I recruit players, and I talk to, in the off season, I talk to most, if not all, OPL players or non-OPL. I just try to talk to as many people as I can, and playing overseas is a very common goal. You know what I mean? Winning OPL is often secondary to making it to an overseas league.
Well, it's like a tactic of how to get overseas, right? Like
Yeah,
if you ask
yeah,
them, why do you
yeah.
want to win OPL? It's like, so I go overseas.
Yeah, so I get
can
recognised
prove
and I
myself.
can.
Yeah.
I think there's no problem in that as well. We have Australian stars in the A League. Their ambition, one, is to win the A League, and two, to prove themselves so they can go over to European competitions. They can turn it into a career, and I don't think that's a bad thing for OPL players to want.
Not at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think there's some players that could possibly make that jump with, especially if the Academy League changes in NA in the new year?
Maybe he's got 4 of them, I think. I think Isles is a little bit too young, but I think the other 4 players on his team wouldn't be out of sorts on any academy team over in North America.
I reckon there's a lot. I think and I said this one time as a joke when I was in Korea a few years ago, but that was that because there was one period where a lot of those players all went at the same time over to Korea, and you would find a lot of them in your games when you're playing solo queue. And the joke was, if you had more than one OS player, you would lose. That was. But I think like my feeling on it is there are a lot of talented individuals in this league, a lot of them, but what we don't have are talented teams in the global sense. One OS player is good. I'm convinced of that. And I watch players like Triple Cheese get 800 LP on the Korean server. Shannon Fire is got to rank 4 or whatever, 1K LP. The list goes on. And there are players who are here now who I think are individually good enough. Okay, maybe not if you transplanted them and you don't replace Rays for Sven, for instance, but it's about you give them a little bit of time to acclimatize to a new region, new server, new play style, and there's plenty of individuals who can make it. I think the real issue is that when you have 5 of them, it's difficult to make a good impression.
Yep. What about you, Spawn? You did jokingly say he has 4 of them, but do you think there's anyone outside of that?
I genuinely wasn't joking. Like, I think Tim and I have actually had this conversation like heaps of times. Like, because like his opinion is my opinion on this, and I think we actually, not to take half the credit for it. Obviously, Tim played at the highest level, and I've only ever been able to watch him play for his career, being lucky enough. But I think that we've said the same thing multiple times. That, the reason I respect the international import that Legacy made this year was because it was a coach. A guy that came in to teach these guys how to play together. And I think that that's why largely they won, because they were the best team. Like, yes, Legacy does have some of the best individual players, but they were by far and away the best team in the OPL. I think, even individually skilled, there are some members of Chiefs that are just freaks of nature when it comes to how well they play League of Legends, but they did not have the teamwork and the cohesion the Legacy had. And that was clearly demonstrated in like the scaling team fight comps that Legacy were willing to play when James was first brought into the system, right? So I think that, I think Tim's hit it on the head. Like, I think that, if you had some form of academy program, like I always play this role out, and I don't know whether this scenario, and I don't know whether Carbon does it, but if we went back to 2014 and Riot Games didn't say you can't have sister teams, if the Samsung Blue and White thing never happened, where they were afraid of the World Finals to happen with Samsung Blue versus Samsung White, if that never happened and Curse stayed in Australia and Dignitas stayed in Australia, and all of a sudden TSM said, you know what, we'll do TSM Academy in Australia. And we had Cloud9 in Australia because, and Liquid has people like MidB, so they've clearly got an eye on Australia, right? Imagine if all these teams had academies in Australia and we actually had good coaches over here and, people that had been a part of the infrastructure and ecosystem. Like, then I think, how many of our guys actually would have gone over? Because you look at people, not just because he's here, but you look at like Carbon, you look at people like Swiffer, who like at the time was like absolutely amazing, I think. You look at people like Radier, who didn't give it his all because he didn't see that clear path because it hadn't been blazed yet, unfortunately. And you think, could we have accelerated this by like 3 years? Like, I think Lost did it in 2017, Carbon? You would know better than me.
Yeah, he left. So we sent him and Tally to the Echo Fox bootcamp.
Mm-hmm.
They did like a scouting ground style, but like only the org did it. We sent him to that after Split 2, just after Split 2.
Yeah.
And they both impressed, and Lawrence got a spot pretty much immediately.
But I think they got to play one qualifier. I think they got, or maybe two. I think they played maybe autumn and winter of 2014. Then by summer, it was like done and dusted, no more of these North American orgs in O's, right?
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if that had stayed for Split 1 of OPL 2015. How many of those teams would have said, you know what, Kensty, who played for Dignitas at the time, you come over and have a crack. Let's see Kensty versus Dyrus. Or,
Challenger on 200 ping, by the way.
Yeah.
Back when Challenger was fucking hard to get.
Was actually a thing.
Yeah.
And like, even if you go back beyond that, you're talking about, guys that are over like 2100 ELO and stuff like that, when it was just ELO and not even Challenger. Like, I don't know, a little bit of the cynic in me is like, I love the line from Men in Black where it's like, a person is smart, people are dumb. It's like an Oceanic player is good, Oceanic players are bad. Like, that's kind of how I view it as well. Sometimes I think if we just turned off voice comms and let them play like pickup keywords OPL, we'd have a better chance.
Maybe. Big one for me is Choo Choo's. Aaron Bland, who has spent the last 2 years coaching teams, or this is his 3rd year coaching, is challenger in NA solo queue right now because he decided to start playing the game again because of COVID. In the US, they went into lockdown much earlier than Australia did, or more serious lockdown at least. So he decided, well, I'll start playing the game again and just challenge it just like that. He's been coaching 2.5 years. Like, they're individuals who are extremely talented.
And Choo Choo's wasn't one of those guys that kind of half-ass coaching as well. There are a couple of people that I know of that have been like, oh, I'm a coach now, but they still grind the game because deep down inside, I think they still would want to play. Choo Choo's, when he coached, just coached. grind of VODs instead, was an absolute student in the game. So the fact that he can do it after 2.5 years, the fact that I love when people kind of flame Juves and Carbon at the moment, by the way, because I watch their streams. It's like, mate, they're working full-time jobs and they're still able to stay relevant in high elo. Imagine if they quit and actually played again. Are you really trying to say that they wouldn't get back to Challenger? Do you really think just because Swiffer has not played for a split and is coaching in Europe that he wouldn't be able to get back to Challenger? We had some seriously good players on the server, and kind of other esports prove it to me. You have a look at Counter-Strike and stuff like that, and we have some relevant people around the world. Yeah,
Rocket League, Rainbow Six,
COD.
There are Australians playing Overwatch in the US.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, COD's another good one. They're out there, man. I think pro. I think WCS points last year was 14th maybe or 16th. It's been done. It's been done. We've seen it been done. It can be done. I mean, it just needs, I guess, happen.
The trail has been blazed, and so that more players from now on, when they're looking forward to those kinds of things and have those aspirations, it doesn't seem as daunting that they can actually. It's actually an achievable goal for them. It's not just OCE.
If you have the talent and you want to do it, you can do it.
Yeah,
I think that's the message.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so I'm playing Valorant. It's a good segue. I've changed my name to Carbon with a lowercase c, and I'm extremely good at GP. I mean Brimstone.
Do you do the full FPS capitalization? So you've got the lowercase c, you've got the zero substituting the O, and you've got the capital N at the end. Is that how you've got it?
No, I never use the zero. The zero, is a account disappeared thing. I always had just a regular O. It was just like Carbon, capitalized like normal. But then Twitch, I couldn't do it. Someone stole my name on League, so I had to use the zero on solo. So then people are just you know what I mean. Everybody gives me the zero now, but it's not me, man.
It's not the real you.
It's not the real me.
This is the perfect time to segue into the little thing that Nico coined the fun segment, and it is just as we described. It is fun. It is fast. It is Dominion, as we like to used to call it.
You haven't been having fun in the first 40 minutes.
Anytime I'm in call with you is fun, Isaac. Let's be real. It's a pleasure to be with you. We talked about players that could have possibly gone overseas. We talked about what if. Let's wind back the history books a little bit. What was, and if you guys can remember, your favorite OPL match or series in history, and even before that, if we want to look at OR as well. Go back as far as you want. We can have Papa Smithy playing Season 1 League if we really want to.
In OS? Or
in OCE. Or involving an OS team.
Do we have to be involved in this story or not involved in this story?
You can be as far detached from you as you want, mate.
Okay. My favorite story is of when the Immunity roster went over to WCG 2013. And they were playing on 200 ping versus CJ. And they figured out that Xin Zhao would be the best 200 ping champion. And the reason I love this story is because Sam always tells it. And then we went back and watched it. So Spooks is running around as a 3-kill Xin Zhao, up 20 CS. And he decides he's going to build Madrid, Ancient Golem or something.
Yeah, the Spirit of the Ancient Golem.
Spirit of the Ancient Golem, the tank item.
Yeah.
And I think he had the Moby boots, and then he has the makings of a Sightstone item. He's a very he tells a story I'm hard carrying the game, and then the rest of my team lets me down. It's no, you just stole 3 kills and then literally threw all of your money into a bin and lit it on fire for warmth, mate. You're the reason that we have this, bad rap around being chokers. You just literally threw your own lead away.
Where's the Blood Razor? Where's the Wriggles Lantern?
I like that one. That's my one.
That's funny. I've got a similar story. It's not my favorite game, but for years. So in the PAX, what was it called? Whatever the last regional tournament was in 2014.
Summer.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I don't think it was called Summer. I think it was called something else.
OPL Finals or some shit. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever it was. We're playing this game, best of 5 against the AV lineup at the time. Had Kensti on it. Funny you should mention his name. Anyway, back and forth series. We were heavy favorites. Game 5, we are up maybe 5k, 6k. We have Baron. We're like hitting their Nexus tower. No, sorry, base tower. The base tower, trying to break the base tower. And in everybody's collective memory, what happened was that Tally was playing Maokai. He walked up to auto the tower when it wasn't like we weren't planning on doing that, and he did it anyway. And Veritas, the Korean player who went on to play LCK and in EULCS and all that, was playing Vayne and just tumbled forward and auto attacked him to death, and then just killed the rest of us because he was just so good. That was what had happened in everyone's collective memory. And for probably 3 or 4 years, all of us made fun of James and it was the because we had ended up losing that series off of that and coming second, and we earned about 12.5 grand less than what we would have earned if we had won, and we all thought we should have won. So it was a $12,000 mistake, and Jimmy wore that for about 4 years, 3 or 4 years. Jimmy wore the $12,000 mistake, and when he wasn't on my team anymore, but every time I saw him when he was playing for Auto, I said, "Hey Jim," and I referenced it, and everybody else who was on that line used to reference it all the time. And then one day I went back and watched the VOD, same as what Jake was saying with Spooks, and I went back to watch the VOD because I was trying to show a new player. I think it was maybe Dragku or someone who was living in the house with us last year who hadn't been around back then. And I was telling him about all the games I used to play and the players who were involved back then, blah, blah, blah. And I told him a story about James costing us all this money. So we went back and watched it. And like, it wasn't his fault at all. Like, Aaron Choo-Choo's was like in the corner and he got like solo killed by the jungler or some shit.
Yeah.
And then he was just an absolute mess. They chased us from one end of the map. It wasn't James's fault at all, but he wore it for years and he never complained. It was so funny.
Trooper. Absolutely true.
Absolute trooper. But
I was going to say, the way I remember that series is actually there was a player that was pretty famous in OS. Well, more infamous. His name was Shelby because he used to sleep through all of the photo shoots. They actually, in the qualifier on the way to it, he fell asleep in their qualifier game. So Veritas had to play jungle and they had to get a substitute 80 carry. And I just remember this guy being like the greatest talent that was never going to amount to anything because he was so lazy. And then he hit like 3 of the best Lee Sin kicks I've ever seen in my life to somehow drag his team over the line. And I was just like, and he was never seen again. He just wafted into the distance to just never be seen. His job here was done.
Yeah.
Do you have
Not
one,
my
Isaac?
favorite game, but funny story.
Do you have like a favorite
favorite game?
series or game or story that you have encountered over the last?
Nothing as exciting as what's just been rolled out. Anything I say will be overshadowed by the 2 stories we've just heard.
Yeah. I mean,
I've got a lot like that.
I don't think there's been a league game that has had more impact on me, and I reference this so often in my articles that it's not even funny, is Claire's Rift Rivals 2018 game against Ascension. That's just the one game that keeps bringing me back. It's just
Do you know what makes me laugh about that play? And this is my challenge to everyone in chat. Who was the caster that called it though? 'Cause I have no idea who that guy was.
That was
when we dragged him out of.
That was Hiprain, wasn't it? It was
Yeah,
he now cast the UK league.
Yes, that's the reason I remembered, because I saw him like just the other day popping up on my Twitter feed because I think he's casting like the league that Swift is in. And I was like, oh no shit, that's that guy.
It is probably like one of the greatest moments in OS Esports. And it's a great call. So credit to Hiprain, wherever he is, if he's still alive. But I'm always like, why was that not an Australian calling that? Why did we get Hiprain and not Atlas to come back and watch Claire absolutely style on people? Who knows?
Yeah,
Who knows?
That would have been nice.
And we've also been talking about, we've brought up some really old names here, Veritas, Shelby. There's a bunch of historic names that we've got. If you were building an OPL Hall of Fame, pick 3 names. Who would be the first 3 people you induct into that Hall of Fame?
Okay, so is it Hall of Fame for playing career alone, or is it Hall of Fame for impact in OC Sports?
Yeah.
Oh,
League of Legends. When I think Hall of Fame, I think the latter. But
I think contribution to OC League.
Okay, so Carbon has to be first. He's got a name so. Lucky is Carbon, because I actually have been way nicer than you than I've ever been to you in the past. But if you actually look at the trajectory, so like Carbon made like going out on your own and taking the risk away from the big odds, like cool. So Legacy was like a gamble at the time, in my opinion, and he did it really successfully. I think they've always been, as far as I can tell, the most above board run esports team. You know, everyone talks about the little shit that goes on in esports, and some of it's just growing pain and stuff like that. But I've always really respected Legacy for looking after their players. Always had really good contracts and stuff like that. I've bought a couple of players off Carbon in my time, and it's always gone really, really well from our end. And then on top of that, he like brings the Adelaide Football Club, one of the biggest sports institutions in Australia, into Oceanic Esports. Like that's not only big for League of Legends. Like if you look at the accomplishments that like Tim actually has, great player, sure, you know, the most improved player I've ever seen season on season. But he probably wouldn't get in for like his, you know, bodywork of playing stuff like at the forefront. It would be like the general manager stuff, you know, while he was playing, all the stuff he was doing around the game and kind of the people he's brought in. Because some of the best people from Oceanic Esports have come through Legacy, in my opinion. And that's not just, you know, players. That's people that have gone overseas for content creation roles and stuff like that. So I think Legacy is like an institution, and Tim obviously helped build the team and now runs the team. So it deserves, you know, huge credit for that. And I think if Adelaide Football Club didn't come into Oceanic Esports, we have a vastly different ecosystem. I think that was the first, you know, splash, if you will, into the pond. Then I would go with Radier, obviously the man with the perfect posture. He's still my point that you can do two things simultaneously and be the best at both things. He was like just incredibly smart dude, went to the gym, kind of taught us all how to sit up straight, probably diagnosed Jimmy's scoliosis, and at the same time was just like an absolute gun at the game, and was kind of, you know, the first of the old guard that was just like the old meme was like, if you had Radier on your team, it's like you won, and if you didn't, you lost. And he would play like 10 games a day and just win all 10 and be top of the ladder. And then I would say it's probably pastry time for me, because he was the dude that made it possible for people to go overseas. He got scouted to go overseas really, really early. He got visa annihilated. He had to stay in OS for another year. And when everyone, if that had happened to anyone else, I think they just hang up the mic at that stage and say, you know what, the year's not worth it. But Pastry stuck around, casted OS again. You know, even after the highs of things like Battle of the Atlantic, people meme Pastry now. But Pastry back in his day was like a killer. He was like an absolute gun commentator. And
he was so good.
He was like the first hype commentator. I'm sure like Mitch, like people like Ubershouts, who I think is maybe the best play-by-play caster in the world across multiple titles at the moment. I'm sure he even would have drawn inspiration from Julian at some point. And people like Captain Flowers would have drawn inspiration from Julian. Like he was that good. And he, like, you know, you talk about the fact that Egan's about to go to LCK. Papa Smithy went to LCK. We brought people to OS to learn from Julian, to then go back to the LPL and now the EULCS and stuff like that. Pulse wanted to come to OS to work on the LPL so he could go through like what Pastry Time had done to like improve his body of work. I think that he is like low-key slept on. He, you know, helped create Atlas as well. Atlas is always really thankful of the time he spent with Pastry Time as well. I just think like he is the OG commentator from our region.
Yeah, I think
Well
just
spoken.
if I can just add on to the end there, in regards to Pastry, I couldn't agree more. I know for me, early on, in my playing career, I got involved. I was getting more and more involved in the broadcast side of things. I did a lot of analyst desk spots and a few casting spots here and there, and every year was a little bit more. It's tapered off a bit recently, but you know, I'm washed now, so I guess it's okay.
Come back to
But he taught me a lot of things, simple things that really helped. I know what Jake is alluding to when he talks about Pastry's body of work. He had a whole I don't know what you call that, but like an improvement plan. Like he had this whole thing set up that anyone could execute on. Essentially, you know, you could give, it's like a guidebook to casting, I suppose. You could give that to in a time where casting was very new still. You know, he had already developed that, and I've casted with him, and it is like he's like a knife through butter. Like he made my job as it, and I was a complete rookie player. I didn't know anything. I just talk shit. Not much has changed, I suppose, but he just made it so easy for you. You just talking. He would just like, I don't know. It's like having someone just underarm the ball and you're in the nets. You're just like, hey, can you just lob for like the next like 10 minutes, just underarm, and I'm just gonna fucking smack him, okay? And he's just like, yeah, man, that's like that's what I'm here for. Here you go. He was really good. He was really good.
Would you have another couple that you would put in yourself, Timmy? You can be different from Spawn. You can be.
For Esports Hall of Fame in terms of contribution to the game, I don't know. There's a lot of names, I suppose. I think. Try and make it a bit interesting. I won't just parrot what Jake said, but I think Swiper is probably deserving of a spot in there. You know, he's one of the few. You know, he started before I did, and he's still going. You know, he's been involved in pretty much every major event, occurrence, change that's happened in the region. He was a really core part of Chiefs while he was there, especially towards the end. I know he had a lot of responsibilities that a player might not normally have, um, and he did a pretty good job, I thought. And even now, you know, he's still playing. No, he hasn't tasted success in a while, but he obviously was extremely successful early on. He's a fantastic role model, I think, for players who are coming up now. Uh, so I think he would be pretty safe bet in there somewhere.
Is there anybody that you guys would put on for a purely on the Rift contribution? People that have, you know, had that longevity in terms of play and the quality.
I think there's a lot. I think there are a lot. I think a lot of those early Chief guys, you know, you could probably put on there. You know, some are probably more obvious than others, but I think a lot of those guys could go on there. I think Hall of Fame is sort of weird. You know, do you reward people for leaving or not? Because it's like, well, you know, you look at someone like let's say like Ryoma. Let's say he stays in the name for the next 5 years, which would be amazing for him, of course. But you know, what does that do for his his legacy here, and how much does that do for Australian League of Legends? But you know, there've been a few dominant players over the years, and I think with a Hall of Fame, it's sort of, I think you need to, I think it's important to look at the totality of who that person was to the industry. And you know, someone like Swiper, I think, exemplifies all the things we like about an Oceanic esports player. I think there are maybe others who, while successful, didn't have that same luster, I guess. What's that?
Yeah,
I didn't
very
really
well
give you
spoken,
any.
guys.
Yeah, I didn't really give you any names. Sorry, I'd have to think about it. But I don't.
Well,
It was DOS.
we've got pastry time. We've got
Yeah.
you,
If
Timmy.
I dumped him, I think Swiper, I think, really deserves it. I think Radier is an easy one, but you know, considering where we are now, you know, he left a long time ago.
Yeah.
I think you could easily put Jake in there in terms of contributions to Australian League. And I do have Twitch chat open, and I did see Ty's mention Bryce EGM. That's a guy who's done a lot as well. But
Immediate
unfortunately, I
veto.
can't talk positively about him on this stream. So I'm going to have to just move on to the next segment.
Yeah, why did he do something naughty?
No, we just can't inflate his ego anymore.
Alrighty. Well, you guys have been an absolute pleasure to talk to. Thank you so much. Before we wrap up the show, I'm going to quickly run through, and I'm going to do my best judge impersonation while I run through the weekend esports. I am by far not a newsreader. I am barely capable to turn on my webcam, but we'll try. So, starting on June 4, which I believe is that today? I think it's
Yes.
today.
Mhm.
Yeah, cool. God, I've screwed up at the first hurdle. we have got some CSGO and Dota 2 hitting your screens. DreamHack Masters Spring Asia, Tyler versus Vici Gaming is on from 9:50 p.m. Eastern. You could also tune in right now to watch Avantget vs Renegades if you are inclined to watch your OCE brothers go at it. In Dota 2, we have got ESL Birmingham Online China, Paris Saint-Germain versus RNG. Two beasts of Chinese Dota going at it. So if you want to watch that, that will be your pick for the weekend. Now we turn our eyes to June 5th, and oh look, we've got two OPL people on. Let's talk about the OPL. So we are starting off the season with the Chiefs taking on Pentanet. Starts at 4 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Western if you live in Perth like me. And we're going to be running all the way through to around 7 or 8 p.m. with Avant versus Mammoth, Order versus Gravitas, and Legacy versus Direwolves. That last game on the card is probably a must-watch. It is a Split 1 Grand Finals rematch. So be sure to turn on the telly for that one. And if we're looking forward towards Saturday as well, it's Chiefs versus Gravitas starting again 4 p.m., 2 p.m. Western. Avant versus Direwolves, Pentanet versus Mammoth, and Order versus Legacy. We've got the two titans of the show going at it to round out the weekend. And yeah, that's the weekend in esports. A lot shorter than what Judgy has been doing in the past. But look, there's more things to catch. You can go watch some Overwatch on right now. There's CSGO on. There's an esports tab on Twitch now, and you can go watch some of the OCE guys when that's on. So yeah, keep your eyes peeled. I would just like to round out the Snowball Show with a massive thank you to Tim and Jake for coming on. You can go follow their socials. They're underneath their pictures down below. You can follow Legacy Os, Order_Army. Thank you so much, Isaac, for coming on for your once yearly appearance onto a video product for Snowball.
I'll take away you mentioning me to interject here with Snowball news wise. A couple of our writers, Emma, Harry, Ellis, and yeah, I guess Ducky as well, came on about 2 years ago. And have spent the last 2 years, building up their writing, building up their quality, and becoming a vital part of Snowball Esports. So it's their anniversary around now. Some of them are today, and yeah, I think everybody who's involved in Snowball in the last couple of years has been appreciative and has loved seeing them grow as writers and people. And Ducky's not included in any of that. He's the same guy I met 2 years ago. He's not improved at all, but everybody else is fantastic.
I'm out. I'm done.
I think I didn't know that, but I think that's a pretty cool occasion, guys. I think Snowball's been a really positive thing for Oceanic Esports over the last couple of years. I know there's a lot of your stuff I've enjoyed reading. So yeah, shout out to you guys for doing a great job, and keep it up.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
That's what we plan on doing. So keeping it up, we'll probably be back next Thursday, same time, 7 p.m. Eastern. I think that's when we start, or 8 p.m. Eastern. Josh is going to kill me if I get that wrong. I can't do time conversions. I live in Perth. Anyways, thank you so much for joining us for the Snowball Show tonight. It's been a pleasure, and we hope to catch you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.